By the way, for fun on the Blaine side, I never asked you, did you see I'm sure you saw The Illusionist?
Yes.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it better than The Prestige.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So if you haven't seen the movie The Illusionist, it kind of came and went, get it on DVD. It's a fabulous movie. There are lessons in it too, but it's a fabulous movie. And by all means, get and read the book, Carter Beats the Devil. A fabulous, fabulous book. Carter Beats the Devil. Comment on news and timely topics. Look, this is a way to be talked about all the time, at least amongst your clients. All right? It's not about Jimmy Carter. It's a fake historical novel, actually, but about a magician. So comment on news and timely topics. All you need is USA Today. This does not require any massive amount of resources. You need USA Today or watch CNN in the morning. Okay? And you got email. Use it. Be timely. You know, Tucker's really good at this. I mean, he's really good at this. You guys saw in the newsletter when he jumped on the John Kerry's thing about how you had to be. Yeah. And then those soldiers made the picture with the photo of, misspelled John Kerry save us because we're too stupid to, and hell. And Tucker jumped on that the next day. Well, there's something every day that you can be commenting on, opining on, making fun of, turning into a little object lesson, and communicating with your people about. So, which of these 10 stories will they be talking about tomorrow? Pick his number one story. He's pretty much got it right. That's the story they're going to be talking about tomorrow. You talk about it too. It shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes in the morning to bang out an email. Read USA Today, pick something, do something, send it out. Be witty. Now they're going to be talking about you in connection with the news story of the day. If you're local, pick a local story. All politics is local. People care more about local than they care about national. So if you're, like the IBA's in the room, if you're local, pick a local story. So don't watch CNN, pick up your daily newspaper and watch your daily news program and think about which of these stories will they be talking about tomorrow. That's the story I want to talk about. That's why, I'm a little handicapped now. Our weekly faxes are actually done 3 and 4 weeks ahead of time. They have to be because we're bigger and they got to move through 3 places and, and I won't email them and, on and on and on. So I can't be quite as topical as I could be before. But I try, and I also try and anticipate what the story's going to be 2 or 3 weeks out that I might be able to tie myself to, or what news story has legs that's going to last for some period of time. Okay? But you have the opportunity to do something every day. Want to be talked about every day? That's how to be talked about. Tie yourself to what's going on. Here's something a lot of people don't know. If you read up on Thomas Edison, contrary to reputation, he wasn't that great of an inventor. You know the very popular story of the 502 experiments and what would I be doing if I hadn't discovered electricity. Now I'd be doing experiment number 503. Nobody really thinks about the fact that if it took you 503 times to figure this thing out, how smart are you? Gee, couldn't you got there quicker if you're the world's greatest inventor? Seemingly 5 would have done it, The reputation was grossly exaggerated as an inventor, in part by his own deliberate exaggeration. What he was a fabulous promoter of himself and very good at getting money. Very good at getting money from investors. Lots and lots and lots of money for thousands and thousands and thousands of inventions that never came to market. Okay? The interesting thing out of this little block copy is that in his demonstrations, he often talked about fascinating applications which he actually had no intent of spending any time or money on, related to the invention that he was promoting. Well, why? Well, because to invent this thing that increases the current in the wall socket and makes it, but if this thing causes robots to run around and bake your milkshakes for you, well, that's pretty sexy and exciting, so let's talk about robots. Right? Even though we have no intention of ever making a robot, we'll talk about robots. He was pretty unabashed about that through his entire career. Andrew Carnegie has this reputation, carefully cultivated at the time, of being the world's greatest industrialist. Well, what he was better at was raising money. And Carnegie spent most of his time shuttling back and forth between the United States and Europe getting money. That's really what he was really good at, is putting 10 people in a room and pitching them. That he was a master at. Again, Trump, people think he's in the real estate business. He's not in the real estate business. He's in the Trump business. Right? So what you see is rarely what is. What we think is their business rarely is their business. And the same is true with us. So it is a mistake to think about this business as a coaching business or a consulting business or an information business or an advisory business. It is not. It is a self-aggrandizement business. It is a promotion business. It is a client control business, et cetera. Jump over to, let's go ahead and do it. Page 58. It's kind of interesting. I'm always suspicious of academic research unless I agree with it. But it's always nice to have legitimate academic research when you do agree with it. So here's what they did. So they take two job candidates. They're all the same, right? Except one of them, the letter says sometimes John can be difficult to get along with. Okay? And then hiring directors had a choice of interviewing either one of the two people. Which do you think they took? Yeah, the answer is kind of obvious given the context of our conversation, right? Is that the guy who was billed as sometimes difficult to get along with was asked to be interviewed much more than the guy who did not have that criticism in his references. Why? Well, we can speculate about why, but the best likelihood is exactly what they concluded, that it made John a more believable candidate because the reference not only said all the good things about him, but it said a bad thing about him. Okay? So again, now let's think of what is being said about Sharon Stone's character by Jeff Bridges. Right? And so what do you want to control? What is being said about you to other people, by the people in your coaching group, by your clients? What reputation is constructed and spread from person to person to person to person? What do you want it to be? Okay? So mostly what I want said is that I'm difficult to do business with and I'm hard to get to. So I want them saying I want them saying all the good stuff, right? Kennedy's a genius. He knows more about marketing seminars than anybody on the planet. He made me $12 million last year. He'll make you a fortune. If you can, what was the line from the movie? If you can get to see her, it could change your life. Right? I just want the butt attached to it. But you should know he's a real pain in the ass to deal with, and you can never get him on the damn phone, and he's irritable. And if you aggravate him, he won't work with you, and he's kind of difficult to deal with. That's what I want said. So by the time they approach me, they're behaving very well. Okay? That's intentional on my part. Okay? Now, if you get a little deeper, or you come to me by having read stuff, and you come through the path, what else do you know? Well, you know a bunch of bad stuff. Right? You know I went broke. You know I had cars repossessed. You know I had a booze problem. Let's see. You know I contemplated suicide. You know I've been divorced. If you read more current stuff, let's see, I got a disease. Why do I want people to know that? Well, there's a couple reasons I want people to know that. One is the buildup is big enough that this is humanizing, okay, I can connect with him kind of information. It's also knockoff things. There's a significant segment of the entrepreneurial population who's been bankrupt. So that connection, right? If you're marketing child development stuff to parents, it's extremely useful if you happen to have a child with some kind of disability. Because as soon as you say it, there's a percentage of the audience, of the constituency, who now connects with you at a higher level. Right? So the entrepreneur who has been bankrupt connects with me at a more intense level than if I didn't reveal that piece of information. Right? I wouldn't, some of them prefer to keep it private, but probably of the 30 clients who've spent the most money with me over 2 decades, 20 of them have been or are in AA. Right? It's not that I drove them to drink. They were there prior to me. I should quickly qualify that. But that's what triggered their interest in me. Now, in a book, it may be 2 lines. You might have even missed it because it wasn't important to you. The guy that it's important to, he it leaps out at him like you jumped off the page and hit him with a hammer. And he now wants to get to me. He feels a connection, right? So I got it. I got choices about these things. I can never say them. I can ignore them, right? I can try and hide them, or I can use them. My advice to you is pretty much be careful about place, but pretty much use everything you got. Don't walk away from any of your life experience that will be meaningful to people. I'll give you an exact example. I'm not going to give you the guy's name, but here's a letter I got at the end of January. I'll just try and read only part of it. I just finished your book and like how it ended with a response about whether or not the reader would buy book 2. Put me down for a big yes. So that's the unfinished business autobiography book is what he's talking about. I was a hard drinker. Went to AA in 1995. Been there ever since. Appreciate you mentioned drinking in the book. I'm sure will help others. I think as entrepreneurs. Okay, I won't read the rest of that paragraph. I won't read the rest of the next paragraph. I'll read you the last paragraph. I've joined Gold Plus, joined the local mastermind group, and I'm attending my first super conference in April. Made sure I got in early so I got the day with you prior to the event. Why does he want the day with me? Because of the connection. Okay? So this guy was gone from a $10 book in one big leap to Gold Plus, which, Karen, what do we charge for? $340. That's all? Okay, so that's $240 times 10 is $2,400. What is that? $1,500 a year, right? Is that right? $3,000 a year. No, is it 3? Is that what it is? Okay, so it's $3,000 a year. He's joined a local mastermind group, which also means he's joined a local chapter. So we delivered a customer to wherever he is, who's given them, I don't know, another $3,000. So there's 6. What does it cost to come to the super conference? $1,000. So there's $7,500. I won't give you the average on-site sales number at the super conference, but I will tell you that it is substantial. So this guy's probably, within 3 months of reading the book, in the total customer value range of 15,000 plus. Okay? And that's just the beginning. Okay? This is very easily a $50,000 to $100,000 value customer. What resonated with him? The personal disclosure. It's all he's talking about. He's not talking about any idea he got. He's not talking about any strategy he's using. He's not talking about his business. He's talking about the personal disclosure. Do I get a lot of them? No, but I get enough of them to know that it is meaningful and it is important to people. I never had time in the Peter Lowe events, but often, especially if I was doing more personal development stuff, I would have a little story that I told about stuttering as a kid. You cannot tell it and not have somebody. Actually, I got a great story to tell you about that. Glenn Turner, which may or may not mean anything to anybody, but Glenn Turner had a company called Dare to Be Great in Coscott, and then he was prosecuted, and it's a big mess. So the federal government tried Turner. The trial went on for 16 months. Hung jury. So when it's all over with, they polled the jury, right? Now, Glenn Turner was a really interesting motivational speaker because Glenn had a really bad hair lip that hadn't been taken care of well when he was a kid. So if you hear him on tape, and so it takes like a half an hour to get in sync and be able to listen to the tapes, because I mean, seriously. And keep in mind, this is a guy who stood on stage, and regardless of the business model, the numbers are, in 36 months, he got 500,000 people to pay $5,000 to be in his program, mostly from his speaking skill, and how like that. Turner's basic model, by the way, it was a very simple thing. And it was the Russian couple asked me about this yesterday, and we'll come back to it. But, I mean, his whole sales presentation was, I can do it. Right? I mean, if I can do this, talking like this, well, you can do it. Right? And then once he figured out that worked, he surrounded himself with a blind guy, 2 midgets, and the whole deal was, but anyway, so they tried Turner. The federal government admits to spending, I don't know, $20 million on the trial. At the end of the whole thing, it's a hung jury, right? Turns out there's one woman who will not convict. It's over with. You can talk to the jury, right? She's on him like, bees on honey. Will you please come to dinner? Because my son has a hair lip. And you're an inspiration to us, right? The guy literally stayed out of jail, because one person on the jury. So every time I told a stuttering story, which is why I started telling it, is because of what he told me about the jury. I said, well, if it works on a jury, if there's 1 out of 13, there's got to be 1 out of every 300, right? No harm sticking it in. I can turn it into a useful story. I never told it before. Started telling it. Every audience afterwards is at least one person. They usually hang around the group that hangs around you afterwards until everybody else is gone. Same with the drinking thing. They hang around until everybody else is gone. And then they want to come up and tell you their my kid stutters story, or I stuttered story, or they want to come tell me the drinking story, or they want to come tell me the bankrupt story. They all buy. Okay? It's a lock. So if I put all of it into one speech, I know I got like 5, going in. So people connect to these things. So if you got them, use them. They make you a more interesting character. See, just like the hiring director wants to interview the guy with the wart than the guy without the wart. Instead of the perfect candidate, he wants to interview the perfect candidate with the disclosed imperfect quality. You are a more interesting character if you do not attempt to appear to be perfect. The flaws are as interesting as are the strengths. The Superman character does not work without kryptonite. Figured it out very early. He's not an interesting character if he has superhuman strength and cannot be vulnerable to anything. What makes him interesting is there's kryptonite. Without kryptonite, there's no enduring character. Strategy of attachment. Here's another strategy for you. So Mike Vance built mostly with Fortune 1000s, not with entrepreneurs, but a terrific career as a speaker, consultant. He wouldn't use the term coach, but client groups, 10, 20, 30 CEOs and executives in a group paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month in order to get together in what he would call creative brainstorming sessions, what we would call a mastermind session or a coaching group. So Mike very much ran our kind of business without ever seeing what we're doing and without really understanding what we're doing. Mike's entire career is based on having worked for Walt Disney for 3 years. That's it. And if you take that away, you got no Vance career. You've got no story. But the connection to Disney, powerful. Smart enough never to try to walk away from it. So for 30 years, Mike's been telling Walt Disney stories. Mike's had himself hooked to Disney at the hip. Smart enough never to try and separate. Ego not in the way, never want to make this about Mike Vance, make this about Mike Vance as the closest you can get to Walt. Helps, Walt's gone. Can't get to Walt unless you're going to do the seance. By the way, did you think more about that? Are you going to do it?
Yeah, we're doing it.
Okay. I got David as boot camp doing a seance. So who are you going to talk to? Perfect. So, so people at his boot camp are going to talk to the dead Andrew Carnegie. We have no shame, right? You should learn the skill from him, and then you can do Napoleon Hill. So you can. Well, who are those people you like who channel the Martian or whatever? Yeah. What's their shtick? They're channeling somebody, right?
Esther and Jerry Hicks.
Yeah.
Channeling Abraham.
Yes. Yeah.
They're not
Huh?
Jones. They actually believe it, though.
Well, it's a great, but yeah. Well, that's irrelevant, isn't it? But I mean, it's a great shtick. Well, Vance is nearly channeling Disney. He just doesn't use that language, but that's Vance, and that's what you're buying. You're buying Disney, and mostly you're buying Disney stories. Now, they have a few methodologies, that came from Disney. So their storyboard methodology, is an organizational planning kind of marketing thing. The 5 sensing thing came from Disney. But Vance attached himself to that and made, I wouldn't call it a mountain from a molehill, but a really big mountain from kind of a small mountain. I mean, somewhat embellishing the extent of the involvement and connection and all of that. So by strategy of attachment, the guy's a fascinating person who can command a lot of money from clients. Without the attachment, he's got no career at all. Dale Carnegie, the franchisees, right, are all connected to Dale. Without Dale, Foster Hibbard, who we had a relationship for 5 years, we created a business for Foster. So Foster's a speaker. I saw Foster speak at a chiropractic event where I was speaking. And so he was on before me, so I went, not really because I cared about seeing him, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do anything stupid. He was the best speaker I've ever seen, period, to this day. He's deceased now. Nobody's a better speaker. He's the worst platform salesperson I ever saw in my life. I mean, you couldn't be worse. Pitiful. Whole body language, physiology changed when it came time to talk about product. I mean, he like shrunk. And here's his whole pitch. And some of you want tapes, and there's tapes, and there's a suitcase, and put whatever you think I should have in the suitcase and take the tapes. This is his pitch. Right? Well, the guy I'm speaking for, I know he ain't paying fees. We're there on 50-50 split on product sales. This is a no-fee gig. So I know I'm making money, but it's pretty obvious to me he ain't making money. So I said to Rodney, I said, how the hell is this guy making any money? You know? And Rodney said, he ain't. He said, you know, and by the way, Foster's whole shtick is, you know, prosperity thinking, wealth, you know. And I mean, Rod said, he's probably making, you know, 50 G's a year tops. And very popular in chiropractic. I mean, and very well known in chiropractic. So Foster stays and watches me speak. And I mean, it was a small audience. I don't know, it was 100 doctors or something. But I mean, I got like 80 of them. And, you know, I did like, this is years ago, I did maybe 40, 50,000 bucks. And so Foster corners me afterwards. And he says, let me talk to you. And he says, I want to do that. He said, and I'm no good at it. I said, you shouldn't. You know, I said, it's the most pitiful thing I've ever seen. So anyway, so we wound up building a business around him, and we created a tour for him, and we fixed him, and got him to make a lot of money. But here was our leverage point for Foster. We were able to connect Foster to Napoleon Hill and attach him. Now, the actual truth of the story is that Napoleon Hill and 3 partners attempted to franchise Napoleon Hill like Dale Carnegie was franchised. Right? In their pilot operation in San Francisco, they hired Foster as the preview speaker to do the evening introductory seminars to sell people into the course. Okay? I turned that into, he mentioned it as an oh, by the way. I turned it into the whole story. I mean, I didn't tell it the way I just told it to you, but I hooked him to Napoleon Hill at the hip. I worked closely with Napoleon Hill. Well, that is true. They did spend one day in a room, him and the 3 guys, closely. They all sat at the same table, and they worked on what the hell they were going to do to try and make this franchise work. So he did work closely with Napoleon Hill. I just left out the part that it was for about 4.5 hours if you take out lunch, right? I didn't mention that part of the story. But so the attachment instantly made him more valuable and more promotable and able to do better from the front of the room. So there's the strategy of attachment. This is relatively new. So these are 2 guys. So think about now what Trump has done most recently. Again, to look at Trump, is Trump's connected himself to Kiyosaki, and Kiyosaki has connected himself to Trump. Well, why? Well, it's kind of obvious why Kiyosaki would connect himself to Trump, even though Kiyosaki's done very well. Rich Dad, Poor Dad's been on the New York Times bestseller list for I don't know how long. What, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Which is a feat beyond my ability to conceive. Spawned the entire series of books. I mean, Robert's done very, very, very well with one short story, which is fundamentally what he's got. Right? I had a rich dad, I had a poor dad. Rich dad did different things than poor dad did. That's it. I gave you the whole shtick. There's 512 books, 6 seminars, a game, DVDs. That's the story. Tells you the importance of a story. One good story. It's better to have 10, but one good story can make you a lot of money. But now Kiyosaki has connected himself to Trump. Okay. Even though Kiyosaki's already doing very, very well, that makes some sense. Trump's connected himself to Kiyosaki. Why? Same reason he's at World Wrestling Federation offering to shave off his hair. Why not? That's the main reason. Why? Is because there's a whole constituency over there that he might not reach were it not for that connection. There's no harm in doing so. It's a segment of the market that's different to him. So this is Mark Victor Hansen and Art link letter. I'm only paying attention to it because we just got our link letter for our client, Miracle Air. The most common thing you hear when you talk to people about our link letter is, he's still alive? Yeah, he is. He's 94, and he's doing great. Since we just signed him and gave him a lot of money, we hope he, lives to be 100. At least, because it's a 3-year contract. And come to think of it, we probably should have got some insurance. But so why would these two guys hook up with each other? Well, for Mark, it's why not? No harm, no foul. It's a constituency he might not reach otherwise. Seniors. They might not be paying attention to him. He recognizes to some degree he's not really famous. Chicken Soup for the Soul is famous. But Linkletter's famous with seniors. So if I'm Mark and I attach myself to Linkletter and his new book for seniors and his website for seniors and his whole promotion for seniors, that does all sorts of other things for me. Why Linkletter to Hanson? Same reason in reverse. Linkletter sees Chicken Soup for the Soul. Says, better to be attached to that than not attached to it. Now, arguably, in both of those scenarios, you got two famous people who, by nature, by instinct, by ego, would probably prefer not to be attached to anybody. But they are smart enough as business people to understand that there is so much value in attachment that you ought to do it rather than not do it. In the case of coaching programs, one of the reasons you come up, so you got a mic, right? Yeah, Lee. Yeah, it's up here at the table. You need sunglasses because of the boots. So how many, well, for those that don't, how many of you know what the Millionaire Mindset coaching program is that Lee does? Okay, a handful don't, okay. I'll do it real quick, okay, and you correct me if I screw it up. This is essentially then I have a question for you. This is sort of a co-op thing, so it gets attached to other people's coaching programs. So how many clients does she have in here? Scott, Charlie, you, okay. So in each of their coaching programs, so let's take Tucker. So he's got 100 and, what do you got? 100 and, well, okay, 165 mortgage brokers in his coaching program who pay him whatever they pay him, $1,500 a month, give or take, and they get to come to some meetings with Tucker, which would, it seemed to me you could get $2,500 a month out of them if they were permitted not to come to the meetings with Tucker. But so, you know, they get to come to meetings with Tucker. They get to use some of his marketing stuff, which is locked behind a wall. They get some calls with him and so forth. Now, first of all, how do you pad the program? How do you add more and more content without doing more and more work, right? Well, and how do you cover a category you don't really want to talk about? So Lee essentially offers a prepackaged add-on to everybody's coaching program with a call a month, a CD a month, articles, emails, etc. But there's more to it than that. What's as important about it as how do you pad the program and deliver more content without doing more work is the attachment that occurs. And so in one fell swoop, Tucker attaches himself to her and her story. She's busy attaching herself to celebrity authors and experts who she interviews, so Tucker gets that attachment. She's attached to me and to Glazer Kennedy, so Tucker gets that attachment, although he has also bought that in another way through my co-branding program. So he gets like 4 attachments here, all at one fell swoop. Who have you interviewed past year of note?
I'm sorry?
Of note.
Art Linkletter, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen.
So
Brian
both
Tracy.
Chicken Soup for the Soul guys.
Right. Les Brown,
Okay.
Jack Hansen. Sorry?
Matt Fury.
Matt Fury.
Okay. So every time she does that, he gets the benefit of the attachment without having to go chase it down and do it himself and so forth. And at amortized, he's got, let's see how good you are. He's got 165 coaching members. So what's it costing him per coaching member per year for you?
He could figure that out.
36,000 a year for 100
Yeah, okay, well, that's the smart way to look at it. You're right. But, okay, so $36,000 a year, which is what you're paying her, right?
It's paid monthly, so it's really easy.
Yeah. How much? Okay, so $500 per coaching member. Now, here's what you ought to know about that. How much do you charge now for coaching?
$14.97.
Right? No difference between $14.97 and $19.97 at this point. So if he wanted to, he could be charging $19.97 and he could make it free. It doesn't make any difference. It's all how you want to look at it. But understand when you look at a program like hers that it's not just about the stuff. It's about the principle of attachment, right? And so how many you got?
Close to 30.
Okay. So there's 30 clients. Now, you also saw another coaching model, which we really should have done yesterday, but is the coaching for other coaches. And you're not alone. In fact, one of your clients, Matt Gilligley, and Tim, what's Tim's name?
Waters.
They started as coaches for other coaches
Right.
who didn't want to do coaching and build a coaching program. So all sorts of ways to skin this cat. So quickly, where do we find you?
Milteer.com.
Okay.
Milteer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next strategy, opposition. Some years ago, sort of a Foster type story. Guy comes to one of my seminars for speakers. In fact, well, yeah, and his name is Jack Henry. And Jack was then speaking for $500 a day, and he was book solid. And he had one product, 6 audio cassette tapes with a rubber band around it that he sold for $49. And so Jack tells me his story at the seminar. We do hot seats. And as I hear Jack's story, important word, story, I'm like, and the fact that he's working for $500 and he's selling 6 tapes for $49, I'm like thinking this guy should be making $1 million a minute and he doesn't know it, right? Because here's Jack's story. Jack was selling himself as an expert in employee and delivery man theft control for supermarkets and convenience stores. The 2-minute piece of information you need to fully appreciate this is that the theft by the employees and the delivery men is 5 times what the shoplifting number is. So most of the store owners think their problem is shoplifting. The problem is all internal. And the delivery guys all steal from them, and the employees all steal from them. The delivery guys steal what they deliver, and they steal other stuff while they're there as well. So the cigarette guy comes in with 4 empty cartons underneath the full cartons, and he puts the little cameras in the empty cartons and goes out with cameras. The Pepsi guy wheels in 6 cases of Pepsi stacked on a cart, yells over to the guy behind the counter, 6. Guy looks out, sees 6, checks off 6. Pepsi guy wheels back out 6 empty cartons, 2 of which are full of beer, and 2 of which are full of Pepsi, and only the one on the top is empty, and then he goes and sells the beer and the Pepsi for cash to somebody that owns a bar somewhere. And so the store owner paid for a delivery of 18 cases of Pepsi, and he really got 4. On and on and on and on and on. The employees, there's 312 ways the employees steal. I don't remember them all anymore, but I can walk into any convenience store, any grocery store, and actually any restaurant, and in 5 minutes I can tell you if the cashier's stealing, which 90% of the time she is, and most of the time I can tell you how much she's stolen up until now on her shift. There's things called theft tracks. You can do it visually. One quick one, just for fun, you pay attention to. If they're stealing at the register from the store, not from the customers, by shortchanging, but if they're stealing from the register, they have to wait to get it out when there's not somebody around. They got to put the money in the register, which means they got to get it out. So they got to keep track of how much over they are in the register. Okay? They can't do it mentally. So they have to have a mechanism for keeping track of how much over they are in the register. The most common is a little pile of objects to which they've assigned a value. So over here is 2 pieces of gum, a button, 3 pennies, and a bobby pin. Well, each one of those things means something. The bobby pin's a quarter, the button's $1, the piece of gum is a nickel, and that's how they can add up how far over they are in the register and how much they can take out. And as soon as in one chain, as soon as you catch one of them, they've all taught each other the same numerical code. So as soon as you know what the one is doing, you can know what they're all doing. in grocery stores, they tape a barcode. That's why if you run a grocery store, short sleeves only. Because if you let them wear long sleeves, they tape a barcode for a cheap item on their wrist. And then when their mother-in-law comes through with steak, because the front-end supervisor can only hear the beeps, they're listening for beeps. They run the steak under the register like this, under the thing like this, under the scanner like this. They scan the $4 barcode, and they put the $20 item through the deal. On and on and on and on and on. None of that's really here, but just as background. So Jack's story is he's an ex-delivery man thief. That's his expertise. Right? He was a Pepsi driver and a bread driver and stole from everybody he delivered to. And all the delivery guys plan it, by the way. They all arrive at the same time, so there's chaos, and they all meet up, and this one gives what they stole to this one. They trade, they swap, they open a store in a garage together. So I'm hearing the story, right? And Jack's telling stories. He's got 4 or 5 really good stories of theft incidents. And he's booked solid at $500 a day. I'm thinking, no wonder, right? So average grocery store loses $500 a day to internal theft. Jack's going in solving their whole problem for $500 once and $49 for a set of tapes to leave behind. Afterwards, I'm taking Jack aside out of the entire crop that was at the seminar, and I'm saying, Jack, let's fix this. Right? So here's how valuable this information was. We immediately raised his fee from $500 to $5,000. By the way, I'm not real subtle about that. I usually just add zeros and see what we wind up with. Okay? He loses 1 client. Now, they all pissed and moaned like there's no tomorrow, but they all paid it. Mm-hmm. Then we took the tapes, $490, add a 0. No difference. Same 6 tapes, same rubber band. Same number of people buying them. Okay? And then we put in a $15,000. Then we took the seminar he was doing, cut it in half because he was teaching too much. So we created basic and advanced. So really, if you want him to do both, it's not $5,000, it's $10,000. So we really took the fee from $500 to $10,000, on and on and on and on and on. All because there was a great story and a enemy, a thing that irritated the owners. They were really mad when you proved to them that they're being ripped off by their employees and by their delivery guys. So you got an enemy. You got somebody to sell against, is the enemy of this owner. The great Jack Sales story was this. I'll tell it first person as if I was Jack. I'm in town doing a seminar for name of grocery store chain, well-known chain all across the country. Afterwards, the owner takes me to his home for drinks and dinner. Beautiful home on a hill in a gated community. Very expensive home. We're standing having drinks looking out the bay window of the living room of his house, and he says, see that house diagonally across the street way up on the hill? Yeah. As you can see, it's about twice the size of mine. Yep. It's got an indoor pool. I don't have an indoor pool. Yep. It's got an indoor basketball court. I don't have an indoor basketball court. Who do you think owns that house? No idea. The Pepsi driver who delivers to my stores. That's the only story you got to tell. Every grocery store owner is like, those sons of bitches. I'll pay anything. I got to stop them sons of bitches from stealing from me. Right? There's an up against the Walmart guy doing very, very well. Not doing as well as he could be doing, by the way, but doing very, very well by positioned as the guy who helps the small retailer come up against Walmart and succeed and prosper. So a strategy is opposition. Right? In chiropractic, I have 2 clients. Paul, who's here, is in a business relationship with Ben Altadonna, and I've had Ben as a client for many years. And Ben sort of sells traditional practice building kind of information to chiropractors. More recently, I have a client, Dr. Chris Tomczak, who's franchising in chiropractic. And the franchise is, of course, the perfect antidote to everything Ben sells and everybody else in chiropractic sells. Because buy the franchise, you never have to go to a seminar again as long as you live. We do everything for you. You never have to buy any books and tapes again as long as you live. You never need another marketing system. This is it. Right? Well, so I got both of them. And I probably went overboard a little bit with the first Tom Shack ad, without naming Ben, of course, but in making the thing in opposition to everything else they were doing. So, you trek off to seminar after seminar after seminar. You come home with shrink-wrapped boxes of crap. You never use them. You got a room full of marketing systems. This is the answer to all that. It kind of ticked off Ben. And because, you can sort of recognize my copy. And with 20/20 hindsight, he had the right to be a little ticked off. Right? I mean, not a lot, but a little. It turns out, however, of course, that not only do both stories work fine and both continue to prosper in their relatively small niche by selling against each other, but even while selling against each other, one is able to sell the other one's thing to his clients. Even the incongruity doesn't matter. So part of the solution to all this was to sell Tom Shack's franchise to Ben's clients. Right? So if you really want this antidote, I'm better off selling it to you than letting him sell it to you without me. Both are an opposition sale to the other. In real estate, for a long time, I did work with Craig Ford and Craig Proctor and sold against each other. Proctor based upon, I'm a guy who's still doing it and nobody else is doing it. Ford, I'm a guy who's never done it and you don't want a guy who's doing it. Doesn't make any difference. The opposition strategy works, just pick something to be in opposition to. We'll go to 62, some advanced strategies, but you have a question.
I have two questions.
Are they quick?
No, not really, probably
No.
not. We'll see.
Don't tell too much truth. You should have said yes.
The first one is about the promotion of other people to my list. I'm doing a monthly call. I have to interview a guest. How much do I need to be worried about interviewing people who are doing very closely related to what I'm doing?
Well, you need to be worried about other things,
Okay.
even more than that. Fundamentally, remember, part of the business we're in is the reputation business, right? So you need to be worried about anything that can be potentially harmful to your reputation. And so you don't just have to worry about what the person does while they're a guest on the call. You have to worry about what they do with the customers that now go to them next and next and next and almost forever. And you have to be very thoughtful about that. And by the way, the longer you're at it, the bigger a challenge this is, because there's a lot of people who you would like to put on a call or you would like to put on a stage, but there's one thing wrong with them that now makes it impossible to use them, okay, if you are careful about protecting your reputation. Now, no matter how careful you are, the other thing I will tell you is every once in a while over time, something's going to slip through, and you are going to have a mess, and you are going to have a mess to clean up. We are very careful, and we still, from time to time, misjudge one. Okay? But you got to be as careful as you can be. So that means you don't put anybody on unless you have some real awareness of what their business model is and what happens to your customer when your customer becomes their customer, right? You can impose, obviously, front-end restrictions on what they offer and what they don't offer, but you can't obviously control what happens down the road, and sometimes you should impose front-end, restrictions. So, for example, let's say you're in the coaching business, and you're going to put Hanson on, okay? Well, he's got coaching programs, but they're deep in his, in his system. So your restriction, of course, would be certainly he can't say the word coach while he's on the call. He can promote books, and he can promote a website. Now, only a certain number of your people are ever even going to bother and go and get a book. And then only a certain number of those people are going to take a next step. And ultimately, a tiny number of your people are ever going to even get a coaching pitch. Okay, no harm done, right? Or little harm done. Now, somebody I won't name, but of similar status, who also has a coaching program, but then converts the people in the coaching program to buyers of various investments and financial services and financial products, some of which are questionable. And at least once a year, he's being investigated by somebody. See, even if you front-end restrict that, you can't let him anywhere near your people. So you got to kind of make a criteria in your head. Like we have a criteria for who can speak at an event. It's more stringent than who will put on a call. So we have a criteria that they got to meet. And if they can't meet those things, we can't let them in. The specific question was, how concerned do you have to be if they're doing something pretty comparable? So you want to give me an exact example?
Ben Glass.
Okay, fine. I think that when you do have a comparability situation like that, or where there's, which is not often, but where there's real likelihood of trade of dollars, okay? Meaning somebody might spend $1 with them that now gets in the way of them spending $1 with you, then there has to be benefit to you beyond just filling a time slot with good content. So there either has to be reciprocity, meaning you're going to get in his list, he's going to get in your list. There's some reason it's somewhat of an equal trade, or can be made to be an equal trade, right? And or you're going to get paid on what he does with a customer when he gets it. So now at least there's direct financial compensation coming into you.
And is that normal on the calls? I know in an event it is, but on those monthly calls, is a split normal?
Well, it's not as normal, okay? I'll tell you, for example, in many cases, first of all, if it's a small potatoes thing, so like it's a book author, and really they ain't doing nothing but their books and maybe getting a speaking gig or something, okay? So think Carol Frank, who spoke at Renegade Millionaire Retreat, and I did a call with, right? Well, Carol's got, she's NSA culture from beginning to end. So she's got 2 little cassette programs that she sells for nothing and a book, okay? And if she gets a speaking gig, she's thrilled to take her fee, go speak, and she thinks that's wonderful, okay? I don't want any money from her. I'm happy to have her on a call. I'm happy to let her make her money, okay? And not really worry about it, okay? Now, Harvey Zemmel, who's going to sell an Ascension series of exit strategies management services, from fairly expensive product to fairly expensive coaching program to you give me $200,000, I move in with you for a year and get your business packaged up so that you could sell it for 4 times what you thought you could sell it for before. We put him on a gold call. We're going to have a financial arrangement. And to use our friend Harvey Brody's language, we have a toll position, and you have a toll position, and you spend a lot of money to create it. Okay, you built an expensive toll booth, and you spend a lot of money to maintain that toll booth. Okay, so you've got a right to collect tolls, and it's not like you don't. And of course, you don't put somebody there just because of the monetary benefit. It's actually the last consideration, not the first consideration, right? Because you don't put somebody there who's selling stuff you don't really like, or whatever. But if they fit all the rest of the criteria, absolutely you ought to get paid, or there ought to be reciprocity, some compensation to you for letting them walk through your toll booth, have your endorsement, and be presented to your people. Having said all of that, were I you, I would most of the time rather not be presenting a Ben Glass or a Bill Hammond, I would rather be presenting a generalist or a linked but not directly linked topic. if I were you, I'd rather be doing Dave D and the psychic salesperson than I would Ben Glass. But several times a year, at least in a niche, it's really useful to give them another niche guy. And the last thing I will say about this, and this is pretty important. When we talked about money last night, people have this finite, infinite kind of continuum that they're on. And so at one end of the spectrum, I always use Ron LeGrand as an example. Okay? Ron believes profoundly that there is no limit to the amount of money his customers will spend in a day, month, calendar year, lifetime. So the fact that 500 people come and take money from him today is irrelevant to him in terms of thinking that now I won't be able to get money. Right? So his attitude is, have at it. Way at the other end of the extreme are people who worry about it obsessively. And they devoutly believe if I let you get $1 from Tucker, that's $1 I won't be able to get from Tucker because Tucker's only going to spend so many dollars this month. And if we have a relationship and we're sharing revenue, I'm getting 50 cents on $1 you got from Tucker. I could have got $1 on $1 if you weren't there, so I'm better off. And everybody is somewhere on that continuum. Without telling you where you ought to be, the reality is once you awaken someone to interest in a category, whether that's better health, whether it's weight loss, whether it's getting rich in real estate, whether it's marketing their business better, whatever it is, you can't fence them into just you. You automatically create a customer for a lot of other people. Okay? The average business book buyer, that's why it's a good idea to do business, but the average business book buyer who goes to a Barnes & Noble store buys 5 books at a time. Right? They all tend to be about the same thing. So when somebody goes, they're into real estate, they don't just find the best one and go home, they buy 5. Right? So at Ron LeGrand's audiences, I did this all the time when I spoke at his info seminars. I'd say, okay, everybody close, Ron's going to close his eyes so you can all tell the truth. Okay? And we know Ron's not shy, and he shows up a lot asking for money. He takes a lot of money from you, so it's not like he's been laying down on a job here. But how many of you own a Carlton Sheets product? Well, all the hands go up. How many of you own a Russ Whitney product? All the hands go up. How many of you own this guy? All the hands go up. Okay, so once they're turned on, switched on, clicked on, no matter how much you sell to them, no matter how often you show up, they're running around. I mean, I know of 4 people in my coaching groups when I had 3 VIP groups who that year paid $15,000 to go to a Jay Abraham seminar. Right? Now, what in the hell, I don't mean to disrespect to Jay, but what in the hell do they need to be doing going to a Jay Abraham seminar? I mean, how much more marketing stuff do you need? You're in a 2-day meeting with me 3 times a year. You're at a super conference. You're at an information marketing summit. You're getting a Gold Plus tape every month. You're getting the newsletter every month that you're whining and moaning you don't have time to read, and you're running off giving Jay Abraham $15,000. Okay? Well, on one level, it pisses me off, right? But on the other level, it's amazing there weren't more of them, right? And so you can't stop it. So each decision is, if they're going to go off and do it anyway, and the person fits my criteria, then I might as well be in a cooperating relationship rather than a competitive relationship, and I might as well either get a piece of it, or I might as well have some kind of reciprocal sharing of customers and leads. So that's kind of how I try and approach it.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other one is quick. I'm getting ready to pick a fight with the biggest estate planning organization because much like NSA. Are there anything that I should be aware of before I do that could be a big mistake?
Are you a member?
I'm a member.
They'll throw you out.
Yes, I'm ready for that.
Okay. You can make that not easy or easy, you know. When I was thrown out, I sued, and after 14 months, won. So, sealed settlement, of course, but, you know, they had to reinstate me, and, you know, in the little directory where they publish the year you became a member, it had to be continuous, not, you know, like you were a new member. But yeah, they'll use, if you really piss them off, they'll probably incrementally attempt to punish and discourage you. So like Summers White pissed him off, right, with his dinner thing.
Yeah.
So they made him move out of the hotel, so he can't have it in the same hotel. So they did a whole bunch of stuff so you can't even get a hospitality suite because of him. You can't even rent a hospitality suite. You can't even rent a suite without NSA knowing you're renting a suite and getting the hotel's got to go get their permission to let you have one before you can even sleep in one. All thanks to Summers. Okay. Now they didn't go so far as to like drive him out of the association because he's got deep roots in the association, used to be on the board, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they've made life as difficult for him as they can make it. Okay. So in my case, they did things incrementally too. And because I kept aggravating them, they eventually, you know, tossed my ass out. So you should expect exactly the same thing, right? You will have some like long-lasting, irritated people from the powers that be hierarchy of the association who may never forgive you, you know. There's a Chairman Emeritus NSA guy, very well known, who he called up Nito Cobain the year Nito was president and said, if you're going to keep being friends with Kennedy, I'm never coming to NSA again. And he's never come to NSA again. So you know you're gonna have that, right? They'll definitely deny you access. So whatever access you've got will be very hard, you know, to come by. Beyond that, nah. And you're there's probably a significant segment of their membership who you will resonate with like you have never resonated with before by doing it.
Is there one of the way that I'm going to start is I'm going to post something on their listserv, very public. There's already been a little going on. I'm a lawyer. I shouldn't be asking you if I can get in trouble, I guess. But did you face any? Were you faced any action that could have cost you money more than it was worth?
No. But it was worth a lot. You know, one client to me over a lifetime, you know, has a lot of value. I mean, no. I mean, it couldn't have gotten any worse than it did. So there was litigation expense, which eventually.
You sued them. They didn't sue you.
No. No, they have their own little tribunal,
right.
You know, and then they convict you and they throw you out. It would be more interesting, which I suggested to them. I volunteered, you know, let's do it at the convention and have like a public, you know, setting fire to me on stage or something. You know. Well, and 2 years later, I would have been saying has seen on the national convention of. But I couldn't get him to do it, and the only person who found it funny was the judge in the courtroom. Nobody else really had a sense of humor about this whole thing, but him and me. Yeah, it couldn't have got any worse. And so for a while, I was writing checks to a lawyer. I used kind of a cheap one, and did all the work myself. But they spent a whole lot more money than I did. But it couldn't have got any worse. And like posting on their site, as long as you're not violating any of the current rules, you know, of posting on their site, and I didn't go stay up there very long if it's irritating to them. But, you know, so the one thing you got to worry about is the access. Now, like in NSA's case, for example, NSA has a rule, if you're a member, you cannot use the directory essentially as a mailing list for commercial or promotional purposes. However, they can't enforce that against a non-member. And anybody can buy a directory for $35. So, you know, like the 2 years I wasn't a member, I actually had more freedom than when I was a member in order to market into the association. I just couldn't go be seen, you know, at the convention. However, for example, NSA also has a rule, if you're a member, you can't like come to the convention hotel and hang out without having registered for the convention. However, as a non-member now, they have no control over any of that. Well, I never went to anything anyway. I hung out in the halls and the cocktail lounges. Well, I can do that, without a badge on. And I'm more interesting because now everybody's coming over going, what is going on with you and NSA? Well, I'm glad you're here. Well, tell me the story. Well, I really can't, but, so, it wasn't, it was what it was. I mean, I would rather not have had it occur. But once it did, then I made much, of it.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. You got to be real quick.
I promise I will.
By the way, are we doing lunch at noon? Okay, and are we doing the same routine? Same routine. Okay.
Okay. In my toll booth position with the IBA program and the Millionaire Blueprints magazine, I do have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork asking me for stuff. And in the chapter meetings, I don't have a problem getting gurus who do technical things to come in and do workshops, etc. However, I'm kind of leery about speakers coming about because they see the Kennedy list.
It's the same answer as to her.
But what my question is what criteria are you guys using when you evaluate the speakers and interviews and stuff?
I'm not going to do that here.
Okay.
However, it's an IBA question. Howard or Bill would be happy to answer for you.
Okay.
Specific to us and or specific to IBAs. Okay.
Oh.
I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to do our criteria publicly for a variety of reasons, including the fact that it might unnecessarily offend people, and
Okay.
there's no benefit to me in this case to do it.
Got it.
Okay. Okay. Page 62. This is a pretty cool strategy. It's called the industry survey strategy. Anybody can do it. So my example, again, the NSA market, where I spent a lot of time, there's another sort of rogue, half parasite that's made her money off of NSA largely for many, many years. Her name's Dottie Walters. And Dottie's about the same age as Art Linkletter, I think, and she'll outwork any of us in the room. She publishes a trade journal for the speaking industry that started out as a little newsletter, and it's a big deal now, and runs some seminars and so forth. And so one of Dottie's strategies, which she now is used repetitively, is she did what a lot of associations do, but prior to her doing it, NSA hadn't done it. So she leapfrogged over them. She did an industry survey and surveyed all the speakers. I have 1 year's copy of it here somewhere to show you. Here, here's 2002. Here's the speaking industry report. A report on professional speakers, speakers bureaus, and meeting planners, where we are, where we were, where we're going, with a special emphasis on the effect of 9/11, 2001, what topics are hot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all, fancy bar graphs and diagrams. So all she did is survey all the speakers. Her market had them all take surveys, compiled all the information, and now everybody wants to know what the results of the survey was that they participated in. It gets 100% nearly of the market into a dialogue with her and actually put her above the governing association body dealing with that market. In fact, they wound up quoting her survey in their publications. So that's a pretty cool strategy. You want to get to the top 50 CEOs of a given industry, do a survey of the top 50 CEOs of a given industry. The vast majority of them are going to participate. Right? Sort of a similar strategy is the interview strategy. You IBAs will like this. It's a client of mine a number of years ago, speaker, consultant, traveling 412 days a year, et cetera, says, I want to stay home. I want to work in my local market. And I want to live in a company like a consultant. So I want to have 8 or 10 clients, and I want to do a lot of shit with them, and I want to do deep and horizontal and do workshops. And, so it's got to be a significantly sized company. And I got to sell to the CEO, and I got to get into him. How do I get into him? And this is a guy that did like leadership training stuff, which is not an easy thing actually to market anyway. So we made a hit list of the 100 CEOs in his market, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul. 100 CEOs he wanted to get FaceTime with, which his contention was, if I get an hour's worth of FaceTime with him, I got him. So I said, okay, if that's true, right? So sometimes people tell you stuff that isn't true, and then you help them based on that, and the result's not the same. So years ago, Rory Fatt came to me and he said, when he was in the food delivery business, said, if they try 6 of my meals, I got them. They all reorder. I said, well, in that case, I can solve your problem, but you better be right, because we'll just give everybody 6 free meals and do free dinners. No problem, but you better be right. So this guy says, if I get an hour of FaceTime with him, I got him. I said, okay, the hour of FaceTime I can solve for you. All we got to do is get you a real legitimate book deal to write a book on your leadership crap, and then we got to send a letter on the publishing company's letterhead from the editor of something or other, of Simon & Schuster or Random House or whoever, to the 100 CEOs, telling them that you're doing a book on leadership and are going to be interviewing 20 to 30 of the top CEOs in Minneapolis, and we've identified these 100, and we put all 100 names on the letter, and we're going to interview the first 20 to 30 who respond and include the information we get from them in this book. Boom. They're all on the phone because they all want to be in the book. Now he's got his hour of FaceTime. I got him what he wanted. Right? In this case, it was what I said right down here. I went back and looked. It was 77 out of 100 picked up the phone, called him, and said, please come see me. When can you come see me? Right? Now, it wouldn't have to be a book. The book's really pretty good, and a real publisher is real good. But it could be a magazine. It could be a trade journal where you got a deal to go do an article for the trade journal and then work backwards using the trade journal identity. It could even be a fake thing, but it would be most effective if it was a real book. Joe, were 3 trade journals in carpet cleaning and wanted cooperation from all of them, so got a monthly tape, which means you got media, so he interviewed the editors of all 3 of the trade journals. Now, as dumb as they may be, what we figured out is they can handle a short interview about industry trends. Every trade journal editor and probably every association executive can handle a short interview about industry trends. They may not know anything else, but they kind of can get through that. So you can use them, right? And so I interviewed all of them. Now you got a relationship with them. Now you cultivate that relationship. Now you always got cooperation. Obviously, you could do the same shtick with CEOs of companies, owners of businesses in a given niche, right? So let's say you want to prospect dentists in Minneapolis. All we need is some kind of media in which the dentists who are interviewed or profiled are going to appear, or the composite of the information gathered from them is going to appear, and we represent ourselves to them as media rather than as someone who wants to sell them something. We will get the dentists to participate. Now we just have to figure out how to make the bridge from where we started to where we want to be. The place yourself in the center strategy, we kind of talked about that. So for the sake of time, I'm going to zoom past it and talk about the rent a person of influence strategy. This again is the attachment thing. I mean, you are who you are with. And so if Charlie is with, in his coaching program, if Charlie is with Lee, and Lee is with these 10 named people, and Lee is with me, Charlie is with all of them. You are who you're with. So in NSA, In 1979, I wind up, most of you know this story, so I'm going to just do it as background very quickly. I wind up taking over this miserable, stinking, cash hemorrhaging, failing custom manufacturing / audio publishing company that was producing audio cassette programs for roughly 50% of the speakers in the country, managing to lose a fortune doing it. And teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. And for a year or so, of course, because of its financial problems, it had lots and lots and lots of other problems. Quality control problems, delivery on time problems, et cetera, et cetera. So its reputation had to be saved or there would be no business. At the time I took it over, I was already rather controversial in NSA because I had managed to, I was a lot younger, so I managed to sort of intentionally piss everybody off even without purpose, whereas now I do it strategically. You're out of the room, but just in case you're keeping count, I just gave you another little plug, so you're welcome. Just remember me in your will. Yeah. I got a list of people I'm planning on outliving. So it had a problem. I had a problem, right? So what do I do to give it sort of a status boost in this marketplace? Well, I go find one of the people who has the greatest status in its marketplace, who I can rent. Okay? Not everybody is rentable, but a lot of people are rentable. So Nito, who was speaking at our super conference, was at the time one of the big names in the NSA community. He had been president of the association, arguably one of the most successful members of the association. Everybody knew who he was. Everybody lusted after his advice. He would draw the biggest crowd around him, asking questions at an association meeting. And best of all, Nito is a business guy. And he was selling things to the NSA market at the time as well, a book ghostwriting service and consulting and so forth. So I rented him. We arrived at an arrangement whereby we produced a ton of product for him at cost, and we paid him a fee, and we did a seminar tour around the country, free seminars just for NSA members with he and I talking about the speaking business. And of course made a big deal out of General Cassette produces all of Nito's product, including all this new stuff that we're showing you at the seminar. And so for a year, I owned them in the NSA market. And that changed like everything because, well, if he's there and we want to be like him, we must be wrong about that, so we'll go over there too. Plus, we want something from him, and if he's there, maybe being there will encourage him to be nice to us too. So he was a client magnet. Now, this was a win-win deal. Some looking at it from the outside would say that he took undue advantage of our very weak position at the moment. He's a very good negotiator. However, everything he got, however painful it was at the moment to give it to him, I considered to be the bargain of the century. So I'm sure to this day he thinks he got the better end of that deal. And to this day, I think I got the better end of that deal. And so we're both very happy. It served both of our purposes very, very well at the moment. And it sort of loops back also to the $175K to go get your butt shot up into space. Is sometimes these things are money very well spent. And so think about if you're trying to leapfrog in a niche, if you're trying to leapfrog in a community, if you're trying to leapfrog in any constituency, who are the top 5 people that everybody in that constituency already knows, respects, admires, is fascinated with? And if you can't attach yourself to them any other way, buy them, rent them, come to some arrangement by which you can connect yourself to them, even if only for a brief period of time, for pay or trade. If there's 5 of them, odds are 1 of them will play. Now understand, our arrangement was not known. I'm telling you something that is not known. It doesn't matter at this point, but not that it's almost as if both of us were dead from the standpoint of it mattering. It doesn't matter. But certainly nobody knew it. It was deceptive by omission, I guess. I mean, certainly, obviously, what the assumption was is that Nito was a client paying full boat for everything he was getting. And of course, we produced the most expensive stuff we could produce for him because we wanted everybody else to want to buy the most expensive stuff. So his audio cassette album covers had gold embossed, full color. You couldn't have made a more expensive cassette album because that's what I wanted you to want, was I want to be just like Nito. Well, pony up, The assumption was, of course, that he was a full boat paying client, when in reality he was not. The assumption is that we were doing this seminar together, him promoting his stuff, me promoting my stuff. There was no obvious disclosure that I was paying him and subsidizing all the expenses and letting him keep all the money on everything he did. Certainly no disclosure of the strategy, So this arrangement was not known, and it could not be known, nor can your arrangement be known. In most cases. Now, in some cases, it can even be known that you rented them, and it doesn't matter if it gets the right people to you and into the room. There's an article, I think it's on your next couple pages, of this guy selling questionable investments. This, by the way, where's Rulak? Where are you? Yeah. This is the strategy I've been suggesting to you for like 3 years that you've ignored me about. So read the article. So this is a guy, I don't mean to say you're selling questionable. I didn't mean to do that. He's selling investment stuff that is not questionable. The guy in this article is selling questionable investment stuff. He went and rented himself Gorbachev, wrote a big check, made sure he was seen with Gorbachev at the country club where he wanted to be seen. Invited the people he wanted to a cocktail party with Gorbachev. Now he's got him. He's got his FaceTime. He's got his opportunity. Couldn't get it otherwise. Rent a celebrity, write a check. Okay? There are worse ideas, especially if you want to leapfrog. Let's talk between now and lunch about getting clients cold if you must. Okay? And by cold, I mean you have no place. You have no basis. So, like, we're a good place. Sometimes that's available to people, sometimes it isn't. You have no place. You have no entry-level herd from which ascension comes. You actually want to go to the street and get consulting clients or coaching members from scratch. The first thing you should know about all that is if you are niched somehow, it is infinitely easier than if you are not niched. And usually the tighter niche that you are, the better. Then it is usually more a financing problem than it is a marketing problem. For example, I can tell you Charlie Martin's case from 0 to, what did you say? What do you got? Yeah, how many people you got in coaching? Huh? 28. What did they pay up front? 25. Okay, so 28 of them at $25,000 plus, what are they paying a month? Okay, plus $12.97 a month, okay? Now she skips all the steps, okay? So there's no product, there's no newsletter, there's no herd, there's no host relationship, there's no nothing. That's Charlie going to dentistry, selling them into coaching, $25,000, $1,200 a month. Tom Shax did the same thing in chiropractic with a franchise, on and on and on. I could give you 20 examples. And the thing we know from all of them is that cost of sale is going to be somewhere between $5,000 and $9,000. So literally, if you tell me you want 100 of them, and you'll give me the budget of $5,000 to $9,000 times 100, and you're narrow enough niched, and you got a story, it's formulaic. So this is more like a financing problem than it is a marketing problem. The more niched you are, the tighter the niche you are. So he's not like even going after dentists. He's going after high-end cosmetic or implant dentists, and there's other criteria as well. So if you're going to get clients cold, here's some things you got to think about. One is create a hit list and farm them. So when David Ogilvy went in the advertising business, he said, I'm going to make a list of 100 companies that we want as clients, and we're just going to pursue them again and again and again and again and again forever until we get them. And ultimately got like 92 or 93, I forget the exact story. Well, most people never even do that. They don't even sit down and say, okay, here's the 100 people I want, here's the 10 people I want, here's the 50 people I want. If there were 20 businesses in this niche that I really want more than any of the other 20, right? So somehow you got to create your hit list. And if the list is too big, odds are you're not going to get where you want to go. Because very few people, most people are way too broad. You know, when they describe to me who their prospects are, their definition is so broad that the resources you would have to have any impact, to do an effective job, you would have to put so many marbles on the table, you wouldn't be bothering to do it. You'd just be clipping the coupons from your marbles. So you got to narrow the field so a reasonable pot of resources can be used to have impact. So most people are way too broad. And so you got to build your hit list, your segment of the segment of the segment of the market, who you are then going to farm. By farm, it's a real estate sales term. It essentially, in real estate, where it came from, what they originally meant was you pick a tiny little subdivision, you call that your farm, and everybody in there gets mailings from you, you go door knock, you're at the PTA meeting, you're out there on Halloween giving away pumpkins, you're driving around with your magnetic signs on your car every day, up and down those streets. You really work that farm. And real estate agents who are good at it, it's a perfectly viable technique today. I teach it. It's in magnetic marketing. You know, you'll drive through a neighborhood and you'll only see one realtor sign. You'll hardly ever see anybody else's. That means she's doing a good job. She owns that territory. Well, you got to take the same approach. You got to carve out a territory that's manageable to you, and it may be spread all over the country. By territory, I may mean it may be 500 names on a list, but you got to carve out a territory, and then you got to be ever present. So you got to be farming them. So you got to be there, be there, be there, be there, be there. That may or may not mean physically. So for many years, one of my farms was NSA. I've been using that as an example now today. So, I mean, I farmed it. I mean, I mailed the hell out of it. I advertised in the publications. I went to every event. I made sure I was visible at every event. So So I did all the manual labor stuff. I contributed to the foundations and the charities. I went and spoke at the local chapters. I was ever present, you know. The most common remark of somebody when they finally attended something, bought something, called me up to be a client is, it seems like I'm getting a piece of mail. You know, I've been getting your mail for like 5 years, and it's like you're there every day. I've read most of it, but Jesus, you know, how can you? And the question is always, how the hell can you make any money sending all that mail to everybody? Well, you just give me $15,000. I mean, that pays for a lot of stamps. You know, they don't connect the dots. You know. So one thing to do if you must go cold is fine. Another thing is, if you got a short hit list and you are a face-to-face person and you want to get face-to-face, then it's all about being relentless. It's a great story. I can't remember. Hey, Sydney, what's the name of the guy that owns a recording studio in New York where we were? Yeah, Garen? Yeah. So she and I are recording the sales training program at this studio in New York. And I've now, we supervised her for a while, and then she's off running and doing a monologue part. I'm not interviewing her, and she's fine by herself. So Steve and I we're ignoring her and talking about other stuff, right? Well, this guy's got a really varied background, very interesting guy. And so he used to be the regional rep for this pizza oven company, which there's a reason why we were having a pizza conversation that's not relevant to you. But so he used to be a regional rep for this pizza oven company that makes a conveyor kind of pizza oven instead of and he had to get it into places in New York. And New York being like the United States capital of pizza, and nobody thought anybody would buy pizza made on one of these conveyor ovens because that's good. And then, so there's a guy in New York that owns he's like franchise king. Any kind of franchise, he owns it. He owns all the TGF Fridays. He owns all the Ben & Jerry's. He owns everything in New York. And he had just bought the master franchise for Godfather Pizza. So Steve wants to get in and sell him these conveyor ovens. And of course, the guy don't want to meet with him. So Steve's telling me the story. He says, so every day. Now this, by the way, understand, this ain't a Kennedy guy, so this didn't come from me. He figured this out. He said, every day, I send him another one of my business cards, stapled to another letter, stapled to the pizza brochure. And now I forget the number, but he told me it was like 93 days or 112 days or whatever it was. And finally the phone rings. He picks up the phone, and it's the guy. And he says, how the F do I get you to stop sending me all these damn business cards? You know, I got more of your business cards than you got. Steve says, no, you don't. I get them printed 10,000 at a time. There's more coming, you know. Guy says, how do I stop this? Meeting. Then we'll stop. Gets the meeting. Now, hardly anybody is that relentless. You know, they're just not. There's a great story in Donnie Deutsch's book about them pursuing, I forget which car company, that they wanted as an advertising client. And every day to the CEO's home, he had delivered a car part attached to the sales letter. So this day, a fender arrives. Tomorrow, a bumper arrives. The next day, the hood arrives. The next day, you know, part of the engine arrives. And you know, although he didn't tell the story exactly this way, I imagine that the CEO is thinking, I got to stop this, you know, because it's a pain in the ass to throw out all these car parts, you know. I mean, and he gets his appointment. So you got to be relentless. If there's somebody you really want to get to, you got to be relentless. The third thing to know is when you are selling cold, it is even more important not to sell. But you really can't be doing a lot of takeaway early because you worked so hard to get in. So you can't switch that on a dime, right? But what you can do is be really, really, really diagnostic. The way not to be salesy is to ask a lot of questions and get people to tell you things. Now, what you should know is that people are dying dying to tell their story and tell their problems and to confide in somebody who expresses genuine interest in hearing it. And the higher up the ladder they are, by the way, the less likely they are to have anybody that they do that to. They are dying to tell their story. And so, like, one of my great questions is, how did you get in this business anyway? Well, they're dying to tell that story. And they've polished that story, and they've worked on that story, and they got that story perfected. It's the equivalent of the how did you two meet anyway story. See, every couple's got that story, and they've fixed it, you know. So the real story is we're both drunk on our ass, and we met in this bar, and you know, the sex in the backseat of the car was pretty good, and we've been together ever since. Well, they've turned that into, we were in Paris and at the Eiffel Tower, and, you know, so they got this thing down, right? And usually they got it as a little two-person George Burns and Gracie comedy act. So they're just dying to have this question asked, and they trot out their act, right? Well, this guy's dying to tell this story. He's dying to tell this story. And then it's like and you ask essay questions. You don't ask, yes or no questions. You ask essay questions, So there's, what's the biggest change that's happened in your business or your industry in the past year? What's really changing in the farm and implement business? And now you got to really be interested in what's really changing in the farm and implement business, because he's dying to tell you. And then what drives you nuts? He's dying to tell you that story, and complain about usually employees and now you can direct it. Now you can start to direct it into whatever it is that you sell. So my directed questions then are, how do you feel about your advertising and your marketing? By the way, I deliberately use the word feel. And now they tell you the shit doesn't work, and I hate the ad agencies, and they go on and on and on and on. If I wasn't selling advertising and marketing, I'd direct it somewhere else, right? So you can start to direct it where you want it to go. And you keep asking questions and listening and nodding and grunting and appropriately reacting for as long as they'll talk. 20-minute interviews turn into 2, 3, 4 hours without difficulty at all. I've made some of the biggest sales in my life this way. You just have to be really, really, really patient. But they'll, like Bill said this morning, you ask the right questions and the client, figures out his own answer. If you ask the right questions, they now buy you. They make the sale for themselves. If you let them talk long enough, they arrive at the point of, what can you do for me? How does this work? All right? And so that's what you got to do when you sell yourself in cold. And of course, you got to wow them. Okay? If you're going to send them stuff at some point, you can't be sending them a damn brochure. Everybody sends them a brochure. Okay? They got fireplaces for that. Especially in a niche. If you see their mail, in the speaking business, meeting planners, it goes in cycles. When I was chasing speaking gigs a lot, it was the trifold brochure. So everybody had a trifold brochure, right? With a picture on the front of them with a microphone and no audience. And our old joke used to be a picture on the front with a microphone, no audience, inside a picture of him standing next to Norman Vitz Appeal with Norman trying to get away from him like he's trying to catch a bus, And that was everybody's trifold brochure. So the meeting planner has got them laid out on a table. They all look alike. They're interchangeable, right? And this goes on everywhere. Today in our business, the speaking business, by the way, it's the one sheet. So everybody's figured out they can get cheap. Hell, trifold brochure. Everybody wants a one sheet so we can email it. Jesus. But everybody does it. So if you're going to send them something, you better wow them. Like, you better send them a lot of stuff. And you better send them, like, all the ammo you got.